Good day. God honors leaders committed to His purposes. Stay with us because we're going to study a partial beginning of the unification of a conflicted world. Dr. Lyons introduced us to 2 Samuel last week. We are still in 2 Samuel and will be for weeks forward. 2 Samuel is primarily the story of the conflicts and the eventual unification of the country of Israel under one king, which is what God had intended all along, and it is still going to happen, the unification under one king. And it is under one king, even though the Israelites don't recognize that today. Well, we'll be studying today in 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 8 to 21 is the official lesson. However, I'm going to start in verse 6 and go all the way. I will read God's word through 21, but after that I will be paraphrasing, and in my vernacular, I'll try to tie a bow around everything by going from 22 through 30, just to be sure that you understand the full story. The application of this lesson is: this is a messy world. There is no question, it is a fallen world, and God has placed men in responsible positions, and those that do and are committed to His purposes, God honors them. And this is part of that. You're going to say, as we get into the lesson, oh, I don't want to hear all this blood and murder. I call it, there was a movie out probably 40 years ago or 50 years ago called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Well, today you're going to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let the lesson be not the good and the bad and the ugly. Only the good part of it is what God wants us to understand, and He wants us to understand that we have a free will. We are, and David had a free will, so we all have to make decisions, and this lesson will teach us that. So this is not the first or the last mess that David gets himself into, and David is not the fulcrum in this. He's not the real one that's in the mess, but he is trying to unify the country, bring it together. And so with that said, I found two verses, had to clear my throat. I found two verses that I wanted to talk to you about before we even start the lesson, trying to hammer down why we're studying what we're studying, and it's so many things that you're gonna say, my oh my, why do we have to study this? There are major reasons for it. I found a verse in Proverbs that I want to be sure you understand, and it is chapter 14 of Proverbs. It's just a little proverb, but it says so well what I'm trying to convey to you as the application for this lesson today. Chapter 14, verse 4, and these are the Lord's words through the writer of Proverbs. Where no oxen are, the trough is clean, but much increase comes from the strength of an ox. What is God saying? Mess happens. Mess happens. And in this struggle to unify the country of Israel, a lot of mess is going to happen. One other lesson, that was in Proverbs 14, verse 4. Please read that sometime and digest that in your mind. The second thing that I thought of when I was reading this lesson, as I studied it in the last week and a half, I pondered and pondered and pondered for the application, and what would my friends on this YouTube lesson, what would they get out of this lesson? And in my Sunday school class, what would they get out of this lesson? And there's further evidence of that. I think you'll draw your own conclusions. But in the books of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 25, and in Mark chapter 3, verse 25, and in Luke chapter 11, verse 16. It's the same. It's the same message, and it is a house divided cannot stand, is what Jesus is saying. He has said that over and over again in his ministry on the earth. But also a man by the name of Abraham Lincoln used that same Bible verse from any one of those three books that I just quoted to you. And Jesus is talking about a kingdom divided and a family divided cannot stand. So further evidence of trying to give you the application of this lesson. Remember, a house divided cannot stand is what I want to make sure you understand. Now, with that, let's move on into our lesson. Remember now that the Israelites have been going through a period of judges. They went through leaders that popped up, more military than anything else, but they also had some wisdom and would try to lead the people. However, they were primarily militaristic and defensive or offensive in their thinking. And we went through this period of judges. In fact, it was a 450-year period before we get to the point where we're going to be in our lesson today. So you remember the name Eli, who was one of the judges, one of the last judges, and then Samuel, of course, was the last judge. And in addition to Samuel being a judge, he was a priest and a prophet. So God is using him, and enough said about that. We have plenty of background on how we've gotten to the point we are. Saul is dead. Jonathan, David's best friend, is dead. They're brothers together in love and in comradeship. And a civil war has been going on between a war between the states. 11 of those states, which are tribes, 11 of those tribes are against David and his one tribe. David is from Judah, and his tribe is Judah. So his one tribe has been fighting with Saul's same 11 tribes that are called Israel. So it's been quite a civil war that's gone on. So remember that David had already been anointed the king while Saul was still alive. Samuel went to David and anointed him. However, David did not understand all the ramifications of that. He went back to tending his sheep and things like that. So that was back in 1 Samuel 16, verse 13. If you wanted to read about David first being anointed. So and remember the theme of we live in a fallen world as we study our lessons. So I'm going to start in chapter 3 of 2 Samuel, verse 6 is where I'm going to start, and I'll be reading, and I'll stop and explain some things that I have done through investigation and Bible study from several different sources. I'm reading out of the New American Standard, verse 6 of chapter 3. It came about while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Who is this Abner? Abner is a general, is a warrior working in behalf of King Saul, and he is really the uncle of Saul, and he has now that Saul is dead. Well, he is more or less the one. You know how these little countries are that have military dictators, and they step forward as long as you've got the military behind you in these countries, sort of like North Korea is going through right now. As long as the army is behind their premier or president or whatever he calls himself, he's all right. But if he loses the strength of his army and loses the support of his army, why, there's a problem. So Abner is in that position. He is of the house of Saul, and the house of David. that Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. That is, Saul's dead. Now, Abner has already found the next king, but he's a puppet king. His name is Ishbosheth. And Ishbosheth is the oldest son of Saul that's still living. There are 4 sons still living, I think, if I remember my Bible right. There are 4 sons still living, and Ishbosheth. So Abner, the general, takes Ishbosheth, takes him out of Israel, because there's war between the Philistines, and there's war still with David going on. They're fighting between the 11 tribes in the north and the 1 tribe down in the south. So there's a lot of fighting going on. And Abner takes Ishbosheth over across the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, and to a little town. And that's where Abner sets up his generals, his headquarters, and his army is primarily there. That's their headquarters from then on. But he also crowns Abner, takes it upon himself to say, okay, Ishbosheth, you are now the king. And so that was verse 6. Now let's go to verse 7. And now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, why have you gone in to my father's concubine? Why have you had sexual relations with my father's concubine? Yes, the father's dead, but this is a conflict. There seems to be that Abner needs a king there, but he wants to control the throne and run things. And at the same time, I'm sympathetic to Abner. You might as well know that right now. I kind of like Abner in some ways, and I dislike him in others. There'll be other characters that come on the scene in this lesson today that I don't like nearly as much, but Abner kind of touches my heart just a little bit. So I'm not freeing up Abner as saying he's a great guy. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. So why have you gone into my father's concubine? Well, he's the oldest surviving son. He's now the king. He will eventually, this Ishbosheth will eventually be killed. And in fact, it'll be the Benjaminite tribes that come and kill him. Now, Saul was a Benjaminite. Ishbosheth was a Benjaminite. And so the Benjaminites are the ones that do kill Ishbosheth eventually. And so there's a conflict immediately. Now, whether Abner really did this or not, I can't tell you 100%. There's places in the way the wording is. If you look at the King James, you look at the New King James. I've looked at the NIV, the New NIV. I've looked at different Bibles, and the interpretation says leads me a little bit to believe that Abner may have not been guilty, but I'm going to assume he's guilty. Let's just assume that he's guilty of this. And Ishbosheth sees it as Abner trying to gain more control, and at the same time, it has hurt Abner as to what his king is accusing him of. Remember, the king Ishbosheth was appointed by Abner and said, "You come to the front. You now lead our country." All right, that was verse 7. Why have you gone into my father's concubine? Verse 8. Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah?" Now, Judah is the one tribe that is not a part of Israel. "Today I show kindness to the house of Saul, your father, and his brothers, the brothers that are still alive, and to his friends, and have not delivered you into the hands of David. I'm the one that you're commanding general, king. Don't you understand that I'm the one that protects you? You're here because I want you here." And that's reading between the words. So, and yet today you charge me with a guilt concerning the woman. So is he lying? Well, probably yes. It probably is, but I would like to debate that, and in my heart, I can't be 100% sure. So anyway, you draw your own conclusions. The Bible is very clear. The word of the Lord is there, and you draw your own conclusions. Abner is reminding Ishbosheth that you would not be king without me. You would not be king without me. And he is saying, King, do you really think I'm a traitor? Do you really think that I would have done these things? And this dog's head, am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Judah is that one tribe that they don't like. Secondly, a dog's head. A dog was kind of a as a filthy scavenger at that time. Dogs were not household pets like they are. The kings had some that were hunting dogs and things like that. But at the same time, this is a slam that says, "Am I a dog's head?" So Abner's upset. Verse 9. Now you're going to see a dramatic change. We were in verse 8, now we go to verse 9. You're going to see a big change here. All of a sudden, something comes into Abner, and he begins his little. This is Abner quote. It's quoting Abner, and he says, "May God do so to Abner, and more also, if as the Lord has sworn to David, I do not accomplish this for him." In other words, he's now saying, I know that God has established and wants David to be the king of the unified whole country of Israel. He's now he's right eyeball to eyeball with Ishbosheth, and he's saying, may God do so to Abner, more also, if, as the Lord has sworn to David, I do not accomplish this for him. What he's saying is, and then I've got to read verse 10, and that'll be part of what Abner is saying. Verse 10, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. Dan is up in the north, and Beersheba's almost down in the Negev desert down south. So all of this is he says, it's well known, and you can see that if you were to go back to verse 1 of chapter 3, which we did not study, the Lord tells us that David's power is growing stronger all the time, and that Saul's power is dissipating and completely going away. Remember now that David had nothing to do. He does not talk to Abner. Abner and David are not in the picture yet at all. And together, I'm talking about. They've been enemies. They've been fighting each other. And David has a general too, but remember, David is probably the best warrior of the whole bunch. So David has a general also named Joab that you will meet in just a few minutes. So to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to even to Beersheba. Verse 11, and he could no longer answer Abner a word because he was afraid of him. All of a sudden, the king, we can see that he's not strong enough to overcome Abner. Abner has control of the army, and Ishbosheth was elected. He's just a 40-year-old fellow that later I believe that David wanted to just send Ishbosheth out to the pasture, let him live a good life. Didn't want to hurt Ishbosheth, but when he consolidated the power, and the power was for God's purposes. The power is not in David's reign. It is not for his supremacy. It is for God's power and the unification. Remember who the Israelites are. They are the ones that God wanted to be a priest-like nation, wanted them to be followers of Yahweh, followers of Jehovah, followers of God, and eventually followers of Jesus. So That didn't work out. It won't work out. But at this time, God is still working with David and is depending on David to unify this country. Ishbosheth is stunned. He can't lose his general. I mean, he loses military support if he does that. So he couldn't even answer. He can't even say anything back to Abner, as Abner is saying, we need to throw the support over to David, and that's going to be quite a deal. Here we go, verse 12. Then Abner sent messengers to David to his place. Hebron is where David's headquarters is. Hebron today, major city in Israel, major city, but a very conflicted city. The Palestinians, the world, the West Bank wants control of all of that, and yet Hebron is where David's headquarters was, and it's still there. It's a major city in Israel today. Then Abner sent messengers to David in his place, saying, whose is the land? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel over to you. That is, David wants very much to unify. And God had said early on in Leviticus, as far back as Leviticus, when he was giving the Levites the charge of being the priest-like part of the group of Israelites, he says, this land is mine. You may use it, but it's my land. God says that. So God is the real answer, but David is being chosen to be the one that unifies it together. I think also Abner may have had some underlying that he sees that Ishbosheth and the country of Israel does not have the proper leadership, so he's going with the winner. Abner's moving over to the winner side of it, and that is he's moving that in that direction. So Ishbosheth had about a 2-year reign is about the time frame we're talking about here. The Bible, you can discern that as you read the Bible. So whose land is this land? Whose is this land? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel over to you. It's suggesting here that we're going to have an armistice agreement. We're going to have a covenant. We're going to make a covenant together, and we will bring the 11 tribes to you. Verse 13. He said, and this is David. David says this, good, I will make a covenant with you, but I demand one thing of you, namely, you shall not see my face unless you bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see me. Now this gets a little bit involved, but in Hebrew, I have a Hebrew translation where the words speak back to me in Hebrew and in my computer. So if you were to use Michal, and I'm just pronouncing it probably horrible, but that's how I pronounce it in the English, it would be Mahal. Mahal is how it's said in the Hebrew language, is her name. So this is David's wife. They were betrothed. They had not consummated the marriage, but remember, betrothal and engagement, or espoused is another word to use. In the Israelite way of thinking, once that engagement came together, I'm not talking about the consummation of the marriage. I'm talking about once it's been announced and they are betrothed, they legally they would have to get a divorcement from that point forward. You remember that with Joseph and Mary. Joseph was going to put her away. That doesn't mean he was going to kill her. That means he was going to get a pronouncement of divorcement. So Michal loved David at one time, but Saul had used her to get rid of David. In other words, he had promised, okay, Saul's the king. Okay, David, you can have Michal as your wife, but you go out and kill 100 Philistines and bring back some evidence to that effect. And with those 100, well, what Saul's hoping is, not hoping, he's thinking that surely David will get killed trying to bring back evidence of those 100 Philistines that he's killed. So it doesn't happen, and David, in fact, brings back the evidence, and so they are betrothed, but Saul turns around and gives her in marriage, which is illegal in the Jewish faith. It was illegal, but he does give her to another man. So now David does not have his wife. However, David's got his own problems. David already has 6 wives. He's got 6 sons by now. If you want to read about that, go back to chapter 3, early chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, and you will see that it even names the wives that he had. This is the beginning of this is wrong, and David did many wrong. I said this is a messy situation, but David is a man after God's own heart, and that means he had faith in God. He loved God. He would always come back and turn to God, even though he made a mistake. You know what? I make mistakes, and I am so thankful that God forgave David. David would get on his knees and ask the Lord to forgive him. I get on my knees, say, Lord, forgive me for what I've done to you, what I haven't done. It may be an omission, it may be a commission, but either way, we are so lucky, and we have a Redeemer who redeemed us from our sins, and the sins are no more. Yes, we will commit sins, but not deliberately. That's a sure sign. If you're doing it deliberately, you are just barely there as a Christian, and you should grow. Stop your sinning is a good word to use. Stop your sinning. You can only do that through trust in the Lord. Let the Holy Spirit guide you. Let the Holy Spirit say, Jim, you are messing up right now. You need to shut up and be quiet about it. So this is Michal, and he wants her back. I think David underlying now please understand this. David is trying to unify the country. If he can get Saul's daughter back into his fold as his wife, the country, the 11 tribes that are not unified with him right now, will then see that David is entitled to be the king of the son. David's a little worried about, can I really get unification? I've been fighting these guys. And do they really see that God wanted me to be the king? So it appears that David loved Michal also, but it will show this unification by him being able to get this done. So he says, Abner, this is a deal breaker. If I don't get Michal back, it's a deal breaker. I'm not going to even see you if you don't make this happen. So of course it's going to happen, and this leads to, remember now, David had many problems with women, and not as many as his son Solomon does later on, but he still had problems with the women, and this is the beginning of all those. We can see what's happening here. So, well, let's go to, that was verse 13. He said, good, I will make a covenant with you, but I demand one thing of you, namely you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see me. Verse 14. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth. Now, all of a sudden, Abner's the one that's been talking to. Abner's messengers have been talking to David, and now David, out of respect to the king of the 11 tribes of the northern end of Israel, he now is talking directly to Ishbosheth. So he says, David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, to whom I was betrothed for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And remember I said that he had to go out and kill 100 Philistines and take back the foreskins and show it to Saul, and Saul was to give him Michal at that time. You know the story there. All right, verse 15. Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. In other words, he sent some men and takes her away. She's remarried. Saul sold her, or didn't sell her politically. He had her married to another man, and we'll see that in the next minute and a half. Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, 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 the son of Lyons. Now, some of you are going to be upset. Well, why would David do this? She's married, and they're going to take her away from her husband. Remember now, that's an illegal marriage because she was already betrothed and never got a divorcement with David. So God's in the right. God's in control here. Even though David has many, many problems with women, David sees it as a unification, and the people can see that David is trying to bring unity to the whole group, the whole 12 tribes. Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. Verse 16. But her husband went with her, weeping as he went. In other words, the man is upset. Now this is, the king Saul is the one that gave Michal to the husband that she presently has, and he's not a commoner. Saul's not going to do something like that. So this guy probably had some clout, some standing in the pecking order of politicians or the elders or the leaders of one of the tribes, and so he has a right to be upset. You would be upset too, very upset. So, but her husband went with her, weeping as he went, and followed her as far as Bahurim, Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go, get out of here, husband, go." So he returned to his home. Now, Michal, you know the story. We would have to move up to chapter 6, but later this love between the two is no longer there. The Ark of the Covenant, Saul had just put it off to the side. It was nothing but a mascot. It became the Ark of the Covenant, which was God's presence, became a mascot to the country of Israel. And yet it wasn't to David. Well, David goes and retrieves the Ark of the Covenant after he defeats the Jebusites and conquers Jerusalem. He brings the Ark of the Covenant back in. There's a lot of little details in between that, but you need to read that, and you could find that in 2 Samuel 6 around verse 16. And it says that Michal now despises David, and what she sees is David. In her eyes, she sees David dancing down the street in front of and playing a musical instrument. Has no clothes on except a loincloth around his bottom, around his lower torso, but he's worshiping. What I want you to understand, he's not being the fool. He is worshiping the Lord. He is expressing himself to God and thankful that he knows enough that ark is God's presence, and he has gone to retrieve it and bringing it back. Michal doesn't see it that way. She sees her husband as the king, and he shouldn't be doing things like that. God's doing it, rejoicing and worshiping. David is doing it to worship God is what he's doing. So remember, David is the one that wants a permanent house of God. He wants a permanent house of God. There will be, my friends, a permanent house of God in the by and by. Mark my words, it's chapter and verse, it's there. You can find it. All right, let's go to verse 17. Now Abner had consultation with the elders of Israel, saying, in times past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Well, you remember Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000. The whole world, I mean, that part of the world, the Israelite tribes know of King David, of David and his exploits and what he's done. And so Abner is trying to sell the deal. He's gone into consultation with the 11 elders. There's probably more than 11 elders. And an elder was one of the leaders of the tribes. He had to be very mature. Normally it was 60 years of age or older. And he had wisdom. They were the tribal rulers. So he's going to them. He's sitting down, having a council with them. Now Abner had consultation with the elders of Israel, saying, in times past you were seeking for David to be your king over you. Verse 18, now then do it. That's what he's saying. Now then do it. I started to call this lesson, now then do it. That's not the central theme of the lesson, but I almost did it when I saw that. So now then do it. This is Abner talking to the elders. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all of their enemies. They had plenty of enemies, my friends, plenty of enemies. And they were surrounded by them just like they are today. So, and where does that come from? Why, we can find that very nicely in 1 Samuel 9:16. What he's quoting here is back when Samuel had talked to God, and it was my servant David will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of their enemies. Verse 19. Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. That is, now Abner and Saul were of the tribe of Benjamin. So you've got some extra special feelings of the Benjaminites about Saul and about David and the enemy David. So he's taking special care. Abner is trying to make sure that he sells the deal. And that is, Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Remember, Saul and Abner both are Benjaminites. And in addition, Abner went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron all that seemed good to Israel and to the whole house of Benjamin. He has now gone back to David and said, it's a done deal. They're in favor of you being king over the whole country. And again, this does not mean that they want to kill Ishbosheth. David has no feeling about that. Do not be conflicted that David was instigator of any of this that's going to happen next. But in fact, I think David would have given him a nice home and given him a place to live for the rest of his life, and let him. He looked at him as a decent man, is what I'm trying to say. Just caught up in the whole turmoil. So, and he's speaking to where David can hear him down in Hebron, and he says it's a good deal. Let's get her done. Verse 20. Then Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron. Abner brings 20 of his men down there, and David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. David has no animosity with, he has taken down all the barriers, yet at one time they were fighting each other. And there's a banquet. David wants to reconcile and the bloodshed to be over with. David wants no further problems. So he gives a nice banquet for Abner and his 20 men. Verse 21. Abner said to David, let me arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king. In other words, I've already recognized you as king. I know you've been anointed as king. Now you will be king. Let me get all of Israel together and we'll do this, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may be king over all that our soul desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Remember, folks, this is God's plan. David would say, this is God's people, not my people. I may be the instrument we're using. I believe that David would be that humble and would have done it that way. Even though David carries a sword, he's got a knife in one hand and a sword in the other. He is a warrior. Verse 22 on, and we will read some of it. And this gets to be the end of the lesson. I will paraphrase quite a bit, but verse 22. And behold, the servants of David and Joab. Now this is the first introduction of Joab in this lesson. Joab is David's general. He is David's nephew. That is David's sister's son. And so Joab is David's general. I tell you right up front that I do not believe that Joab had the best of interest at heart. He was a warrior, but he was used by David. And eventually David will pass on to his son Solomon. And he will say eventually in the book of Solomon, get rid of Joab. He will tell him that. Well, it may be in 2 Samuel that even David tells his son that. I can't remember where the verse is, but now one of the other problems that's a big problem here. Abner in a battle had killed Joab's brother. But if you go back and look at that in 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 20 to 23, Abner pleaded. He knew who Joab's brother was. They were enemies. And he said, please turn aside, put your sword down. I won't kill you, but I'm going to kill you if you keep charging at me, if you keep coming at me. This is why I kind of like Abner, the way his attitude was. And he says, please turn aside, Joab's brother, but he doesn't. So Abner has to kill the brother of Joab. So Joab's got a personal vendetta here that's going on. And so Joab came from a raid and brought much spoil to them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away. He had told him to go get the people of Israel and bring them back, and we'll have a great celebration. We'll make a covenant together, and we will be unified. And he had gone in peace. Verse 23, when Joab and all the army that was with him arrived, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, came to David, and he sent him away, and he has gone in peace. He didn't send him away for anything. Don't construe that as David wanted to get rid of him. David said, yes, go get your people, go get the people, our people, the people of God, and bring the country of Israel, the 11 tribes back, and we will have a covenant. Then Joab came to the king and said, what have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why then have you sent him away? And he is already gone. Verse 25, you know Abner the son of Ner, that he came to deceive you and to leave you, to learn of your going out and coming in and finding out what you're doing. Joab is saying, I think Abner is a trickster. He's gonna do some evil things to you. So now Joab, and I'm going to paraphrase the rest of it. It's from 26 on into verses 30. Joab murders Abner. And he does it, remember, this is a city of refuge. This Hebron is a city where God has said, until they can be tried, until there's a trial with witnesses, a person that's in trouble can go into a city of refuge and have protection. Well, Abner comes back, and Joab says to Abner, puts his arm around him and says, Abner, let's go out and talk. Well, they walk outside the city gate, and at that time, Joab stabs Abner and kills him. Now, to go on with the rest of the lesson, David is just absolutely shaken. It just really hurts him. You'll see it, and as you read the lesson, you will see that David is really mourning and really wants the whole group of people, all the Israelites, to mourn Abner. They have a funeral procession for him. He calls in front of Joab and in front of all the people. He calls Abner a great leader. He did a good job, and I am sad. And he tells Joab, Joab, you have done a bad thing. You have not done right here. And that's why later David will tell his son Solomon, get rid of Joab, is what the best advice I could give you. So he puts a curse on Joab, is what he really did. And it is a touching thing what we see in verses 28 on forward, all the way to 39. In fact, David just laments and really has some things to say about Abner. So we started the lesson with, we are in a transition. We studied David's effort to unify the nation of Israel. As I said early, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you saw it, you've read it. The Lord hides nothing, my friends. He hides nothing. This is a tough world, and it would be much tougher if you don't have the presence of the Lord walking with us and pulling things away that could be evil and evil and evil, more and more evil all the time. So this lesson has much good, it has much badness, and it has much ugliness. Remember our Proverbs 14:4, and where no oxen are the trough is clean, but much increase comes by the strength of an ox. David is going to step forward and unify the country. God's work continues on. We will continue our study of the struggles, the triumphs, and the defeats of David. But David is a man after God's heart. Thank you for listening to the Word. Come back next week. We're going to study forward in 2 Samuel. God bless you.